Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive with us. Today we are going to be talking about something super relevant to all of you out there looking for jobs in tech.
Especially if you're interested in startups.
Yeah. We're going to be looking at how gender stereotypes can actually impact a tech startup's ability to attract new employees.
The research we're looking at today is a 2024 article called Working for Jessica or Michael, Implications of Gender Stereotypes for Job Application Intentions at Technology Startups.
Catchy title. Yeah.
It is. And it kind of hints at this idea, that there might be some implicit bias going on.
Like from the applicant side.
Exactly.
Huh. So they flipped the script on that classic study on implicit bias in hiring.
You got it. That one from Bertrand and Melanathan back in 2004. But this time we're looking at it from the applicant's perspective.
I'm already intrigued.
Well, one of the findings that jumped out at me right away was that female-led tech startups, they actually seem to have a tougher time attracting applicants compared to male-led ones.
Really? That's kind of surprising in this day and age, isn't it? It is. And it really shows you how stubborn some of these stereotypes can be.
Even in tech.
Especially in an industry that's supposed to be all about, breaking boundaries and thinking differently.
Right.
So this research was done by a team from California State University, Fresno, the University of Mannheim, and the University of Alberta.
Okay, wow. So quite the collaboration there.
Yeah. And they actually ran two separate online experiments.
Two?
Yeah, one in 2020, 2021, and then another one in 2024.
Okay.
And they had over 1,200 U.S. job seekers participate. So it's a pretty solid sample size.
So tell me more about these experiments. What were people actually doing?
Okay, so basically they were shown these fictional but really realistic online job postings.
Like for real companies?
Not real companies, no, but for cybersecurity startups, which is a, hot industry right now.
Totally.
But here's the thing. The only difference between the postings was the gender of the founder and the top management team.
Oh, interesting.
Everything else was the same. The job description, the company, the benefits, all of it.
So they were controlling for everything except gender.
Precisely.
Smart. And what did they find?
Well, what they saw was that job seekers consistently rated female founders lower.
Lower on what?
On competence, agency, and warmth.
Wait, even though they were equally qualified on paper?
Yep. The qualifications and job descriptions were identical.
That doesn't seem very rational.
It's not.
Yeah.
But it shows just how powerful these stereotypes can be. There's a theory in psychology called lack of fit theory.
Lack of fit.
Yeah, basically it means that when we see women in roles that are usually associated with men, we tend to see them as less competent.
Even if there's no evidence to support that.
Exactly.
Ugh, that is frustrating. And then you have that other problem of, what was it called? Prescriptive stereotype.
You got it. It's this idea that even if a woman is successful in a male-dominated field...
They're judged more harshly.
Right.
So they might be seen as less warm, more aggressive.
Or pushy, even.
Just for exhibiting the same traits that would be considered leadership qualities in a man.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So back to the study, were job seekers actually saying that the female founders were less qualified for the job?
Not necessarily. They used established scales to measure these perceptions, and competence was definitely lower.
But the real problem was warmth.
Yeah.
I thought women were supposed to have that women are wonderful effect going for them, where they're generally perceived as more warm and nurturing.
There is that general perception, but it seems to disappear when women step into roles that go against those traditional expectations. It's like those expectations are acting as a filter, distorting how we see women in leadership.
So women are seen as warm and nurturing unless they're trying to be the boss.
It's more complicated than that, but that's the gist. Yeah.
Yeah.
And remember, all this is happening subconsciously. Job seekers might not even realize they're doing it.
Wow. Okay. So before we go too deep into all of that, let's talk specifics. How did the researchers actually measure how likely someone was to apply for a job? Did they just ask them yes or no?
Oh, no. They went much deeper than that.
Oh.
They actually created a whole index to measure intention to apply.
Okay.
It was based on things like how likely someone was to visit the company website,
Makes sense.
whether they would customize their resume or cover letter,
Okay.
even if they'd be willing to do an online job assessment or work a full 40-hour week.
Wow. That's pretty thorough.
It was. And like we were saying, the warmth factor was huge.
Even more so than competence in some cases.
Right.
It makes you wonder, do you think job seekers are worried about a female founder being a tough boss?
That's a really interesting question. And the researchers actually found that job seekers did have concerns about employee empowerment at female-led startups.
Huh, so maybe there's this underlying assumption that women are less likely to let their employees have autonomy or take ownership of their work.
It's possible.
So it's not just about the founder's individual qualities, it's also about how people perceive the company culture and work environment based on the founder's gender.
Yeah.
Wow, this is pretty heavy stuff. But I'm really hoping the researchers didn't just leave us hanging with this problem. Did they offer any potential solutions?
They did. And I think you'll be happy to hear what they found. Stay tuned for part 2.
All right, I am ready for some good news after that last segment. What did the researchers find?
Well, they discovered that having gender-balanced leadership teams made a big difference.
Really?
Yeah, it actually significantly boosted applicant interest in those female-led startups.
So it's not an impossible barrier. Just having a more diverse leadership team can make a real difference.
It really can. And, if you think about it, a more diverse team, it just signals a wider range of skills and perspectives, right?
Right.
And that could lead to, better decisions, more innovation, a stronger company overall.
I can see that. But is that the only reason it works? I'm also thinking maybe it's about sending a message about inclusivity. Like,
Yeah.
hey, we're not just talking about diversity, we're actually walking the walk.
I think that's a really important point. Potential employees, they want to feel valued and respected no matter their gender. And a gender-balanced leadership team, that's a pretty strong signal that the company is committed to that kind of inclusive workplace culture.
That makes a lot of sense. It makes you wonder, though, is it that companies with gender-balanced teams naturally just attract more diverse talent? Or is it the gender balance itself that makes the company more attractive? It's kind of a chicken and egg thing, isn't it?
It is. And it shows just how complex this whole issue is. Companies that are already committed to diversity and inclusion, they're probably more likely to have that gender balance at the top in the first place.
But then just by having that diverse leadership, they become even more appealing to a wider range of talent. It's like this positive feedback loop.
You got it. Diversity breeds diversity. It creates this virtuous cycle.
So if you're a female founder out there and you're trying to build a successful tech startup, what's the takeaway here? Clearly aiming for gender balance in your leadership team is a good place to start.
It is, but it's important to remember that you can't just change these deeply ingrained societal attitudes overnight.
Right.
This isn't about just tweaking a few things at the company level. It really requires a much broader shift in expectations and perceptions.
That's where it gets really challenging, right? We're talking about changing fundamental beliefs about gender roles and leadership.
We are. And I think it starts with each of us becoming more aware of our own implicit biases. Even if we think we're being completely objective, we all have these unconscious beliefs that can sneak in and affect how we perceive things and how we make decisions.
So like when we're evaluating a job candidate, are we really just focusing on their skills and experience? Or are we letting our assumptions about gender creep in? It's a question worth asking ourselves.
Absolutely. And if you're a job seeker, it's worth asking yourself, am I giving female founders the same benefit of the doubt that I might give a man? Am I looking past those surface-level stereotypes?
Those are some great questions for all of us to think about. And it's something we can all keep working on both individually and as a society. Now, the researchers also pointed out that gender isn't the only OLI factor that influences someone's decision to apply for a job, especially at a startup.
You're right. There are so many other things to consider, like the company's mission and values, work-life balance opportunities for growth, and of course, compensation.
And let's not forget that startups, by their very nature, are often riskier than established companies. You're potentially giving up job security for the chance of hitting it big down the road. That's not a trade-off everyone's comfortable with.
Exactly. So whether you're thinking about joining a startup or any company, really, it's important to weigh all of those factors carefully. Think about your own individual needs and goals.
Well said. Before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to touch on one thing that really stood out to me in the study.
I'm curious, what was it?
The fact that while competence, agency, and warmth all played a role, competence and warmth had the strongest impact on whether someone was likely to apply. Agency, on the other hand, didn't seem to matter as much.
That is interesting. It seems kind of counterintuitive, especially in a field like tech, which often prizes bold, disruptive leadership.
Right. You would think agency would be a super desirable trait in a startup founder, but maybe it's not that simple. Maybe there's a sweet spot when it comes to agency where it needs to be balanced with those other qualities.
That's a good point. It's possible that too much agency without a corresponding level of warmth and competence could actually be a turnoff for potential employees.
Like it might come across as arrogant or reckless.
Yeah, exactly.
And remember, we're talking about early stage startups here. At that stage, it's not just about having a brilliant idea, it's also about building a solid team and creating a culture where people feel motivated and supported.
Exactly. In those early days when a company is still finding its footing, warmth and competence might be even more important than raw ambition or, that move fast and break things mentality.
So maybe the takeaway here is that it's not about having one specific set of traits as a leader. It's about finding the right balance for your specific context.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. And I think that's a great segue to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore some of the more nuanced findings of the research.
We were just talking about how agency seemed less important to job seekers than warmth and competence. Did the researchers look into that more? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, they did. And it seems like the type of agency might actually be the key.
The type.
Remember how they measured agency? They used questions like, does this founder seem bold? Or do they take an aggressive approach to making money?
Yeah.
Well, that kind of like aggressive, profit-focused agency, it might not be as appealing to job seekers as, say, a more collaborative approach, one that's more focused on people.
So it's not that agency is a bad thing. It's more like it needs to be balanced out by other qualities, like empathy and, actually caring about the well-being of your employees.
Right. Especially in tech, where there's this huge emphasis on, innovation and disruption. It's easy to forget about the people involved.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in that move fast and break things mentality. But it sounds like job seekers, especially those who are thinking about joining an early stage startup, they're also looking for leaders who are approachable and supportive.
Exactly. People who are actually invested in their team's success.
It makes sense when you think about it. Joining a startup is a big risk. You're basically putting your faith in the founder's vision.
Right. You're taking a gamble on them.
So you want to feel like the person in charge is not only capable, but also someone you can trust and connect with, someone you can relate to on a human level.
It's about finding that sweet spot,
Between drive and compassion.
Yeah. Ambition and empathy. It's about being a leader who inspires people because they want to be there, not because they're afraid.
This kind of brings us back to what we were talking about earlier, doesn't it? The fact that women leaders often have to walk this tightrope. They have to be assertive and competent, but also warm and approachable. It's this balancing act that men don't always have to worry about.
That's a great point. And this research really highlights how important it is to recognize and challenge those double standards. We shouldn't be telling women that they need to act more like men to be successful.
Right.
It's about creating a work culture where different leadership styles are valued, where everyone feels like they can lead authentically.
I love that. And it's not just about tech, right? This is about leadership everywhere. We need to broaden our definition of what it means to be a good leader.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really great takeaway for our listeners. The next time you're thinking about a potential leader, maybe for a job or an investment opportunity or even just a volunteer position, think about the qualities that are important to you.
Are you looking for someone who's like super dominant and aggressive?
Or are you open to other styles? Leaders who are collaborative and empathetic and actually care about people.
It's something we should all ask ourselves. And the answer is going to have a big impact on the kind of leaders we see in the future.
I think that's a great note to wrap things up on. It's been a really thought-provoking conversation, and I hope our listeners got as much out of it as I did.
I know I did. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been a pleasure. And to our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep.